Okay. So yeah, let's get started.
Start.
I read your work. I read through the whole thesis, and I liked the poster as well. It was really conveying the whole of your work in one visual way. So yeah, I kind of got an idea, but there are some questions as well which are still lingering.
Yes.
Because I see that there's a lot of work in abstraction and understanding what is knowledge and what is tacit knowledge. So it's really interesting for me. So maybe we can get started with probably your motivation behind why this topic and especially why tacit knowledge. So yeah.
Yeah. So I'll introduce briefly what is this. This is what my thesis is about. So and maybe yes, maybe I have some stories that can explain why I decided to focus on that. So my graduation project is about the hidden curriculum. So what are the learnings of students that are that cannot be put in explicit learning objectives, and maybe when you learn how to use Illustrator, there is a context, there is a relationship between people, and there's also influence as well what you learn. So you end up learning, of course, about Illustrator, but also learning about something else. For example, if it's in a group project. So it started. The topic of my graduation started because I worked for ID Academy for a couple of years.
So this could be probably explained to others. Maybe all of us, the ones who are viewing, might not be having an idea of what ID Academy is. So maybe
Yes.
you can give a bit of an introduction as to what this is about.
Yes, absolutely. So ID Academy is a course in TU Delft in the Industrial Design Engineering, and is a first-year master course for all the 3 masters that are in IDE. And the course structure, it's quite interesting, and it's very different from other courses that I took part of as a student, and I've seen as a student assistant, or I've heard of from other people. So students in a year, they have to choose 14 workshops to do. These 14 workshops vary very much on topic. So you can learn from photography to 3D modeling. You can have case studies of whatever topic, from KLM to service design. You can learn how to big 3D prints. We had, for example, one workshop on podcasting with Donald Norman. So there are very different topics, and students have to pick 14. And they basically they dedicate one day of this. One day is dedicated. Sorry, one workshop is in one day, and they dedicate that day to learn that skill, or to get a grip on that knowledge, or to exercise on a specific thing.
So one skill a day kind of a program, right?
Sorry?
Like one skill a day kind of a program, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so students choose 14 of them in a year, something like that. But we have a lot of different workshops. So there's like 3 per week, and students have to pick one and have to choose. So there is a lot of choice involved. So this is the course. Of course, we don't teach the course, but we have different coaches as well, and often different places where to learn that skill. So as a student assistant, I had to manage student expectation, understand students, understand what workshop we're working, what we're not. And I had to design workshop, redesign them better. So there was a lot of involvement from my side to understand the student perspectives. And this is a nice story, but when normally in the Netherlands, there is a day in which you go drinking with your fellow students. And so we have this workshop on Wednesdays, only on Wednesdays. So normally
After the workshop
day,
is done, you have drinks, right?
Exactly. So after that, you have drinks, and that allowed me to, in a very informal way, talk with students. And a lot of students that I talked to, they were noticing, the importance of this course, but at the same time, they were telling me, yeah, I could have done, if they finished, for example, they're like, oh, I could have done it differently. Yeah, I mean, and when I was asking, okay, but why would you have done it differently? They were like, I don't know. Yes, because it's cool, but I thought I didn't get the most out of it. And then I asked, okay, but what's the most out of it? And then there was this question kept coming, what was about that was like that students felt that they could have done differently or they could have learned more. So, and because I had no answer specifically, and also there is another thing that the board of examiners, that there is a board and up on the hierarchy
Of the TU Delft, right?
Yeah, they evaluate the course, and they also struggle to understand and identify what actually student learns specifically, because you cannot track it. So because they actually learn specific skill, but the fact that they choose and they learn these skills that honestly can be obsolete in a matter of 3 years, 4 years from now. So then what do we have? Like, what do we actually teach in this course?
So the skills are more in the surface level, but then there is something much more they are gaining from being a part of this course, which is in a way not measured or understood, right?
Yeah. You kind of know, because everybody has this idea of like, well, helps you to choose, right? Or helps you to explore, or but there is no you cannot prove it. You can just assume it, and there is a common sense. Every time I talk to people, there's like, yeah, I choose between what I want or maybe what I need. All of these things that were coming, but they were all in pieces, so I couldn't really understand, okay, this is what they learn. It was very difficult. That's why
also I think the course, like the courses which are offered like every week, it's something really different, right? And it is even the next year, the whole program, the skills which are being offered are also totally new and different. So I was like really wondering as to how you, in an educational perspective, how do you really know that these are the skills which they learn? Because it might also be that these might get obsolete, and as you said, right?
Yeah, exactly. But then I think if we, this is why I decided to look at this hidden curriculum, because it shifts completely. It's not focused on the skill per se, but it's focused on a I think, or a deeper or a higher level, how do you want to see it, but it just shifts the question, because if the skills are not the important things, then what ID Academy is teaching? Because honestly, not one single student followed the same workshop as the other one. So how what are we teaching then? So I think looking at the hidden curriculum, I think, helped to shift the question from we teach these skills, or students learn these skills, to a more holistic approach, I'd say.
So yeah, maybe now we can get to the aspect of defining tacit knowledge, and if it's possible for others to understand, because it's really difficult to grasp.
Yes, I agree. So it's still difficult to explain it and to understand it. Every time I review and read about it, I'm always questioning, is this the right way to go, or have I considered everything enough? But so I can talk about my experience, but I can assure you there are much more experienced and knowledgeable people to talk about tacit knowledge. But
How do you define it? I think
yes,
with all your readings and observations so
yes,
far.
yes. So there like in general, tacit knowledge is all the kind of knowledge that you cannot explain verbally or numerical. Yeah.
So it might be really difficult to explain something which cannot be explained verbally.
yeah. But please, normally I talk a lot in a very not philosophical way, but like very up in the air. So
Yeah, we can go on.
Yeah,
Yes.
bring me down if necessary.
Mhm.
But so a very concrete example that I can give you in terms of the basic tacit knowledge is I'm driving a car and I learn how to drive the car, right? I know where the gear needs to be and my feet where they needs to be and blah, blah, blah. So those are explicit learnings I have. But honestly, every person that drives a car tells you that you actually learn how to drive a car after you get the driver license, right? So all of the small things that are you can't describe, they are there. So you can talk.
Well, we can describe this, right? We can describe that we have to hold our hands in this way and we need to press the brake in certain cases. But why is it difficult to explain, or is it something much more deeper in terms of your own?
No, well, again, there are so tacit knowledge. There are levels also. So there are some views. For example, people that work with EI, they always talk about tacit knowledge as something that hasn't been explicit yet. So they say, okay, as human being, we cannot, keep thinking about everything to know exactly in detail, to know exactly what to do and how we do it, because otherwise, it would take too much time, to just, how do you walk? When do you know when it's time to run or to walk if you need to go somewhere, for example? So but there are also other views in which they say that everything is tacit, so everything is tacit knowledge, and we can actually describe a little part of it. And an example, language. So again, you learn a language, but actually when you learn the real language is when you are within the context, within the people that speak the English, for example. So as if you learn the grammar, so let's see like that. So the grammar behind a language, that's explicit knowledge. But then how you speak and all of that way of saying that you can make it explicit, like, like there is a dictionary and with way of saying, for example. But when to use it, when to use a way of saying, like, okay, there is an English way of saying that that's not my cup of tea. Yeah.
Okay, that's not my cup of tea. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we made it explicit, right? We put this in an explicit way. But when you use it, you absolutely don't think about it. It's just a way of saying, and it's just something that you experience. So to give you another example, if you go on if you're a manager in a big company, so this is why, for example, in knowledge management, this tacit knowledge is extremely studied, because it gives a kind of a advantage. Understanding that type of tacit knowledge really gives an advantage of to innovate and to understand your company. Because, like, if you are a manager, you know that in certain moments, and that's also is influenced with intuition as well, it's very entwined, these two topics, I think.
And I think I see a lot of applications in management theory as well, right? In terms of management studies, they really most of it is external, let's say presentation or oral skills, but there is much more to it. The way
Yeah.
they are interacting with others, there are subtle things which are not really explained as a part of the course, maybe, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, but so for example, if you're a manager, you start, you know, understanding when to say what. And then you start learning about the people you're talking to, and you understand your customers. But it's something that you can't be, you know, you can't be. It's very difficult to explain why you pick that, like, you know, what is that give you that impression that you know what kind of customer you have or client, for example. So this is, again, so tacit knowledge is not just something you cannot talk about. You can make it explicit to some extent, and then that's the ongoing discussion to what extent you can make it. But it can be explicited, but it takes a lot of time to do that.
Could you give an example of, I mean, I can understand things which are explicit and things which are probably tacit, which are not difficult to explain, but how can something which is difficult to explain be made explicit in some way? Like if there is an example.
There are ways. So there is a, so in, so there are many methods to explicit this, but maybe I can give you an example that's quite interesting. So I have a boyfriend, I have an English boyfriend, and I am Italian. And so there was a very short, to make a very long story short, there was this friend of him that I didn't understand what kind of a relationship was there. And she didn't follow certain steps that as Italian, I would expect it. So the steps where I got jealous about this girl, because in Italy, if you are a friend of a guy, if you're a girlfriend of a guy, what you do, it's you normally try to make comfortable the new partner in a way that, hey, we are only friends, and that's very tacit, right? It's extremely tacit. And
it's difficult to say, right? You can't just say this to the person as well. You need to show it.
Yeah, but you don't
action,
even,
right?
Yeah, but you don't even realize that you have that, because at that time I didn't, you know. And then when I talked to my friend and another Italian girlfriend, then that kicked, because we had different perspectives on that topic, because he was like, yeah, but why you were so jealous, you know? Like, and I was like, I don't know, like she didn't do what I expected, right? But then I wasn't able to manifest what I was expecting, aka her give me the acknowledgement that she's only a friend, you know. And with different perspective between me, this Italian girlfriend, and my boyfriend, then we managed to reach this understanding. Oh, okay, so this is a cultural thing that we have, that we are not aware of it, and in which now I can explain to you.
So in a way, by making this explicit, you were able to communicate with the other person and come to terms with, right?
Yes. So it's also, tacit knowledge also goes into culture as well. It really is into culture, because basically tacit knowledge are all the things that you give for granted, that you do without even thinking, and you recognize when something goes wrong. And this Kolb, it's experiential learning. He made the experiential learning theory, and I think it's very common in education. Or Medzirov, that talks about transformative learning, in which he talks about this point of view that we need to it's important to understand that we have them. So this is also tacit knowledge. So these are things that we think about, that we are not aware of it, but
we take it for granted.
Yes, yeah, and they influence the way we see it. So with this long explanation of tacit knowledge,
I think it's clear now. Yeah.
But what I want to say is that tacit knowledge is not something fixed. You know, it's not a book.
It's a bit more fluid, right? Changes based on every experience we have.
Yeah, it is a kind of a process. It's not just. So because they're in knowledge management, for example, they try to understand like the procedural knowledge about certain things. So the manager, if you ask the manager to explain what type of every step he takes and why and how and when and what, then you start understanding it. So that's also. But that is a more understandable, and it's a more, let's call it procedural knowledge, and that's very common in a lot of I think you've seen it in my thesis in a lot of authors. But there is a part in which there is this cognitive tacit knowledge, or you can call it theoretical, and this part of ingrained schema that we have in our mind that are not just fixed, because the person that I am now, you know, talking, if we look back at when that happened, when I got jealous and blah blah blah, it's different. It's a process. I've kind of,
you have evolved in a sense, right?
Yeah, I became aware of something that still influence my behavior, because it still does. But at the same time, I can, you know, get I'm learning how to, you know, deal with it, and it's
so you're saying that it's partly external, it's manifest as actions, but it is also something very much internal in terms of your mental model and your schema, right?
Yeah. Okay. And if you think about it, our schema influence our actions. So that's also, they're not just they're not extremely separated, they are more entwined together. So they are entangled in this conversation between our ingrained schema and this procedural way of doing it. So driving a car, riding a bicycle, it's really, you know, it's practical, it's procedural. But for example, driving a bicycle in the Netherlands or in India, the style of it
is different. Yeah.
That's more cognitive, you know, like more like it's your culture where you are in, that makes you how you drive. And you can only discover when you have where something doesn't work. When you know there is a tension, then there is the opportunity, let's say like that, to discover this tacit knowledge, if you start thinking about it, if you reflect.
So that's something which I was trying to understand more. When you say a tension happening, and how do you discover using this tension? If you could explain a bit more.
Yes, of course. So the tension can be, for example, I am in the Netherlands. I know how to drive a car in the Netherlands. I go to Italy. Italians are extremely different. Or I go in India. Oh man, it's even different, right? So these are moments of tension. But in the moment you ask yourself why, so you start reflecting on. It's a sort of laddering. You have to do this. You know, it's in the end. A lot of authors talk about reflection and breaking down the things that you give for granted. You start, you know, breaking down. If it's procedural for the manager, or if it's very theoretical, it's still very important to, when you have this breaking moment, to use it to this tension moment in which something doesn't work. Okay, why doesn't work? To start questioning yourself.
For instance, with the same instant which you had, right? With trying to understand the body language of your boyfriend's friend. So was it similar? Like, was it a case of you were made aware of your own self by means of attention? Is it some kind of an interpretation of that?
I couldn't hear you properly. Sorry.
Is the audio clear?
Yeah. I missed the part.
1 second. Yeah, is it audible now? Is it better?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, so you mentioned this example previously, right, with respect to you becoming more aware of this. So is it some kind of an example of having a tension because you reflected then because there was some difference?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just brings you, so if something doesn't work,
Mhm.
it brings attention to you, right? So if there is something different, it brings attention. From let's talk about food, you know, if you have good pasta and then you have mayonnaise on it, and us as Italian, we don't put mayonnaise in pasta, it's just you just lose your passport, you know, if you do that. And it's a moment of tension, like, okay, why are you putting pasta on that, you know? When there is something that doesn't work, that it doesn't work in your kind of in your mind, you know, like how you expect, then it's a trigger that you can use. And that's basically the moment of tension. That's I decided, okay, I need to find a way to create this moment of tension. But it's not easy. It's not an easy job, also because there are so if you look at the experiential model of Kolb, and you know, he creates these 4 areas of people of way of learning, and some people score higher in certain part and some people score less. For example, you know, you can be a good conceptualizer or a very good doer but not think that much. So there are people that are more willing and interested in thinking and rethinking, and there are people who are whatever, I don't care, you know. And so there are differences in people, and there are differences so also in the results I had from these 2 I created. So for some people really works, for other works less, and that's fair enough.
So before we get into this aspect of your design of the tool, I was also really interested to know from your background. So in terms of doing a design for interaction masters and specializing on in terms of knowledge management, say, right? So I'm like really curious to know how you navigated the fuzzy front end, and I presume there was a lot of abstraction in the very beginning, in the first few months. So how did you really come to what you're doing right now?
Yes. So imagine I came from, oh, there is something interesting that is called tacit knowledge. I want to discover this. To here, yes, it's been a very long journey, I have to admit. And I'd say the first month when you start, you know, learning about this, and honestly, there is so much knowledge about tacit knowledge, and that's very funny. But a lot of people studying tacit knowledge, and then you're trying to figure out what this is. And in design education, because it's where I'm working, I really had to identify. I think that was for me was the moment in which I realized, okay, that's what I'm actually doing. I had to realize that tacit knowledge is so extended and so universal, or at least on Earth, it's universal, that I had to take this tacit knowledge and then look at the design and the educational part. So that's when I realized, but it was already a couple of months after. I mean, I used a research design approach. So that means that you start doing things and experimenting, and then you start understanding what you're getting out. And because the main question I had as a research project was, okay, but how can I unveil the hidden curriculum? So just to, I think I didn't mention, but tacit knowledge, it's a way to say, it's the, I call it, it's the tacit knowledge is the hidden curriculum, and it's basically tacit knowledge in design education. It is in education in general, because it's not the first, it's not only in education, it's not only in design education specifically. The hidden curriculum, it's very common, and people talked about it, but I call it the hidden curriculum in design education. So that's clear, because I had to understand, so it's extremely context specific. So I had to understand what fields were important for me and helpful for me to understand what tacit knowledge was.
So what would have been different if you had, let's say, done a master's in knowledge management, or let's say management studies? So they would have had a different approach towards, let's say, defining the scope and coming up with something concrete, right? So
Yeah.
through this background which you have, what were the ways in which you transferred the knowledge into this thesis of yours?
So that's a good question. So yeah, I asked my question, this question to myself recently, and I think so. You have the scary part here is that like there are much more knowledgeable people to talk about this than I am. But from my personal opinion, I think there are different ways of doing research. So for example, I think if I was in a knowledge management master, I would have a very specific question at the beginning. And then I would just carry experiments, but not on in the context. So like not in the real world, but more not in situ, but in vitro. Let's call it that. So in vitro is when you have this research that you do, but it's it's not in reality. So, and instead, as a designer, you use your skills and your knowledge and your intuition as well, because it's also very important to use your what sounds common. That's very slippery on tacit knowledge, because that's also, it's very very mixed. But I think the designer, sorry for the sound, that's a message. I will turn this off. So disturbed.
Just a second. Just switching off my phone. Yeah.
But I think as a designer, when you do research, you have a very small idea and you can put it into practice. It's so easy, you don't have to have already a lot of literature and then prove that exists, or experiment in vitro and then prove that exists. But you just use your skills to do something, to say and understand something, and then okay, let's do something else, and then you kind of create a knowledge that how I see it, it's more contextual, so it's more related to what the context is, I think. But at the same time, you're much more free. So imagine if I could think, I know, if I was, I could imagine if I were in a knowledge management master, and I would do my graduation on what's the tacit knowledge that is created in design education or in knowledge management education. I would probably start using techniques that are questionnaire, interviews, and observation, that are very good.
Common, right? Yeah.
They're very and we shouldn't take them out. They're extremely important. But at the same time, if you start with a qualitative approach in which you start navigating a bit without already fixing where you're going, that I think really helps to understand better it's kind of, you create knowledge. Imagine you create knowledge on a map, a little bit here and there and there, and then you look up as a bird, and then you say, oh, okay, that's what I'm in that area. It's very interesting for me. Then I'm gonna continue to work on that. So
yes, in terms of converging and diverging and going in cycles, which might not be so common for the management studies or in educational masters as well, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe we can, sorry, we're adding some points to this. Yeah. You were saying some points. Okay. Yeah, so we can go to the next part. Like we want to know in terms of, you have defined the problem and then you started identifying ways to formulate the hidden curriculum, right? So what is this hidden curriculum and how did you come towards making it concrete?
So so you're asking me to give you an example of the hidden curriculum that I defined. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So well, let me so in this course, ID Academy, there was this problem that there was not a clear curriculum, and there was a hidden curriculum that's part of Tacit Knowledge. What I identified that with the tool I designed, I identified that the course trigger exploration in students. But what means exploration? That's the interesting part. Because of course, like if you ask, the funny thing is, if you ask to every student, they will tell you probably, if you introduce the question with, do you think exploration is part of the curriculum?
Yeah, they will say yes. I think it's important, right?
Yeah. But if you ask them, okay, what's the curriculum of ID Academy, then they couldn't give you an answer. So
that it's kind of a hidden curriculum then. It's not explained, but it's actually what is inherent in the curriculum itself, right?
Yeah. So it's given for granted, but at the same time, it isn't, because if you ask a student, they can't tell you. And so you have this exploration, but again, imagine what does it mean exploration for you? It doesn't mean the same for me. So what I try to do, I basically look at all of their reflection on exploration and what does it mean for them. And I try to identify, and I identify these 3 dimensions. So these 3 things that differ and they make them different in when thinking about exploration. So the first, there are 3. So the first dimension is, what's the goal of exploration, right? So I don't know for you, but for me, exploration means just getting new stuff, new stuff that I never heard about. But for Hardik, my friend, it's getting new stuff that I know I don't know about. So it's, for example, he's an SPDer, he studies strategic design. Yeah. And when he saw what was Scrum, he knew that he needed to know what it was. So he needed to learn. And that was his exploration. So like your exploration is, it's for your profession. It's for it's for the things that you don't know. For example, Scrum. For me, so when
an unknown, right? Like for Hardik, it's more of a known unknown.
Yeah, for Hardik, it's the known unknown.
Yeah.
And for me, it's the unknown. that, for example, when I heard about, I still remember that. So when there was a coding for designers, I was like, oh yeah, let's go for that. You know, like I had no idea what coding was. It wasn't coding for EI, you know, two things that I had no idea. And I was like, yeah, let's do. And it was cool. It was very interesting for me as well. That was something that I had no idea what it was about. So the second dimension, it's more related to your attitude. So there are people that in moment, or let's wait, I need to check this. Yes, you're here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are you are here now, or so the first dimension it was exactly the goal. So what's the perceived goal or aspiration? So create an expertise, so or a novelty. So unknown versus known unknown. The second was confirming. It's what's your attitude. So it's more yes. Sorry, related to what kind of what's the way you explore. And some people are the attitude is towards this uncertainty. So if you look at if I move the arrow, you can see it, right? So
Yeah.
if you look here, you can see that this is an extreme. This is a reflection of a student, and he says, I don't care a lot about what a workshop can bring to me. I enjoy the casual exploration. This uncertainty about, you know, the process of exploration. I don't need a goal. It doesn't need to be planned. Oh, I moved. So
we see there are people who value some kind of serendipity, right? So they don't want to be totally sure of what they will have to expect from a workshop, but they just want to go for it because they might just discover something.
Yeah, exactly. And instead, there are some people in which when you explore, and when you still like to have some sort of steps in which you know you can reach. So for example, if we look here, it says I try to improve my weaknesses because I foresee myself in doing something I believe I cannot, for example. Or I actually like to learn things that I can actually pursue. And if you think about it, it's quite easy. So in me, if you look at so the workshop I took about coding and for EI, I mean, I didn't reach at all a level that was sufficient, you know, and I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it, let's try, and if it doesn't work, whatever. But I had my friend that was with me. This is why I also went with him. He's a bit of a geek, and he really likes to prove, you know, that he can do it, you know. So that's that part of exploration that have a sort of an achievable goal. So that's a bit of your attitude. And then there is the last dimension. It is about the approach. So if you really if you follow yourself, your instinct, or your way of doing things, or you have this need for guidance. And if you think about an exploration, there are people that when you explore, it's, you know, it's safer to have something that's maybe not guide you completely, but give you some sort of structure, some sort of solid point. And there are people who don't care about it. For example, I mean, yes. So Janus, it's that the teacher of this course, he doesn't care. He just wants to do it. You know, he yeah, whatever. I'm gonna find this out. You know, I'm gonna put myself in this position, and I'm gonna do it. Well, in my case, maybe sometimes I also like some a little bit of structure, you know. So these 3 dimension, they're very opposite, and of course they're a bit generalized.
So
So
there is chaos and there is order, and you have certainty and comfort or something.
oh yeah. So so of course, so what I found that's interesting, and what I decided to use also for how I use the findings, I found that so nothing of these dimension is bad, right? Or anything, or nothing is good. These are just perspective in schemas that we have in our minds. They are what they are, but they can bring some positive things, right? So if I want to be a professional, if I see exploration as in a professional way, you know, it can bring me further in certain ways. But at the same time, I risk not to see what I don't know at all, you know. So novelty for me, is not really the novelty. So I risk to be already too focused. And these things, it's quite interesting. So when in the tool that I designed in the workshop, students start discussing about these things and these diversity, and it really comes natural. So I could see in their reflection, because they had to write it down, that if a person was extremely focused on, for example, I see that if, let's take, I prefer guidance, for example, on the right corner here. You know, if I prefer guidance to work and for teamwork and personal work, I notice that people who do not have the need of guidance risk to go in this, like, I want complete freedom. So they are not, so I can see the risk of the other person, like of the mental way, of the ingrained schema of the other person. And I've
So the
learned,
curriculum, in a sense, has to accommodate all these different personality types.
yes,
Is that what you
yeah,
mean?
yeah, that was, yes, it's, I think it should, at least it should in a way consider these things, because if exploration is for everybody, these people are completely different, right? And the risk for all of them, they're different, and the benefits are different too. So then I said, okay, but how can I how can we use these findings? Because I mean, these are three dimensions that if like, you can easily use it, right, for other things and other courses, but how to use it in ID Academy? So I use these dimensions to create discussion between the students to define somehow where they were at. So maybe I can so yes, in this I created this little animals that are foxes, but I've been told they are moles. They look like moles, so I'm very, very sad about it. But so in this workshop, that is the introductory lecture of ID Academy, I said, okay, let's just ask them, okay, where do you put yourself? And then students put themselves, okay, I like novelty, I like this, I like that. And then they started discussing. And they started discussing about what were the benefits and the risk of each ways of seeing things and each way of having this goal, etc. And then in the end, it was fun, because a lot of students, they told me like, well, you know what? In the end, we've noticed that the risks can also be the benefits. And I was like, yes, that's true. Actually, it's you know, it's both. But the most important thing is that you are aware of these way of seeing it. And I don't have an answer in, you know, how can we make it? How can we teach accordingly for these students? That I don't have it as an answer. I think it would be very interesting. So this, like, creating creating a context in which these diversities are took into consideration. That would be extremely interesting. I'm not entirely sure how we could do it. But so in my case, I just introduced to the students these concepts, and then it's up to them if they want to continue thinking about it or not.
So when you say introducing some concepts, it is in terms of these personality types, the qualities, and trying to reflect on where they belong.
Yeah.
In this axis. Also, if you could explain other ways in which for instance, you had described certain tools for unveiling tacit knowledge and other aspects, right? So, is it somehow can it be translated to for an individual as well, like?
For what?
For an individual, like this is specifically for the course which you have with Idea
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yes, so not this specific exercise. So this is more like just a discussion about the three things and how do you deal with these things. But the tool that I designed. So the tool it's I can show maybe a picture. Yeah, so this is the tool. As you can see, it's just a it's a paper in which students need to maybe compare. Let me see. Sorry, but there is. So you compare basically three. So it's a very simple tool. It's just a paper. It's just a piece of paper in which you first talk about the experience, and then you start comparing, experience. And these experience can be whatever. In this case, the experiences were the workshops. So it was just easier to do that. But
it was a reflection on the workshop which was conducted for them, right?
Yeah. And then after reflecting, so they ask themselves why, and why I see it in this way, etc., etc. Then they created this this board, and they start writing. And so I think the important, so the tension moment is created in two ways. So here in step 3, when you have these constructs that are, well, it is based on repertory grid technique. That's which is a method that has been developed in the 50s, in which basically let me think about how to summarize. So the concept behind is that every individual see the world in different ways and puts opposites in different ways. That means, for me, what is bad? If I tell you, for example, bad in terms of a bad person. Sorry, but there's a little bit of accent there and in here and there. So if I say bad, you can think of an opposite. What's your opposite?
Good, right? Yeah.
Good, yeah. But if I say a bad person, what's the opposite of a bad person? A good person.
A good person.
Yes. A gentle person.
A gentleman, yeah.
Yeah. So every person, of course, this is simplified, but if I or malvageous, is it English? I don't know. Or horrible person. If you say horrible, what's the opposite? For me, it could be something different than it's for you. So that's the concept behind, and that's when you create the tension moment, and then you ask yourself, tension there, why? And then you ask yourself, oh, that's why I see in this way. And then in this fourth step, when you discuss, you start really, I noticed that when students were start talking to each other about these concepts, it was very interesting because they really had differences in their way of seeing
So
things.
their polar opposites might be totally different, and then they have a discussion on why it is different, and that is because
Yeah.
of the tension, right?
Yeah, to me it's quite interesting, the, how do you say, the fact that this tool, it's extremely open because students had to find their own workshop, so it wasn't forced in any direction. So basically the concept that you the opposites that you create are really up to you. So every time is a big question mark in what's gonna happen and what data I'm going to get, you know, and so I had, for example, so these boards are for 4 people. So and you can see that on certain boards, students were discussing a lot on yes people, no people, what you can learn from people, why do you learn from people, I really like the interaction, what are my social skills, you know. And this is an example, but and they had a lot of discussion about the use of people in these workshops. But in another case, for example, a group, they were very focused on their design identity. So everything was referred to, okay, I have a goal, but why I have this goal. And they were discussing about, okay, do I have to choose every workshop because we have this goal? What are these goals? So, and I mean, they're very different. So every group led the discussions in certain ways, and that I think for me was a very interesting things to see, because you can really like you have first of all rich data, but at the same time you can really see how students were taking, you know, their own independent discussion.
What would you say as the key takeaways from your thesis? How would you probably summarize the core or the crux of the insights which you gained,
Mm,
if you could put it that way?
yes, I think that the diversity, because I kept with the concept of diversity. So I kept thinking that you know, I always try never to create patterns. I really don't like patterns because something is missing out. But I think as a personal reflection, as a personal gain, and also I think in academia maybe, or anyway with this project, and people who are interested in it can really learn what's like that diversity. It is diverse, so it's very difficult to create groups and categories, etc. But at the same time, it's important to create enough category and enough diversity to discuss about it. So I think I don't know if I explain myself, but you know, when I always think that a person is different from everybody else, and then we shouldn't put them in categories. But
To categories.
somehow,
But somehow, for the sake of simplicity, it
yeah,
happens to be that we put them in categories, right?
yes, and I think that this graduation project shows that we can, in a way, we can look at education not just as a way of, okay, we're learning this, we're learning the skills as just a package of knowledge, or but also in a way just shows that we are different, and our mind and our way of seeing things are different. Therefore, our learnings will be different. And yeah, so that's my, I think the main message. It's very common, to be honest. I mean, like, I'm not the first one that says that, but I think it adds at least a little bit of yeah.
What do you think would be the scope of this work extending further into, let's say, in terms of academia as well, or the ID Academy course in itself? How do you imagine a future ID Academy course which is taking into account all your research and learning so far, right?
Yes, so we are talking with this with Janus. So how I see it, it's quite different from his view. Even though I've been able to convince him a lot, so I'm very happy about it. But how I see it, I think that the skills are very important, but also they're absolutely not important for ID Academy in terms of students should really consider these way of seeing and these little learnings besides the mere skills. And when I talk about learnings, because now, sorry, we've been talking about the hidden curriculum as exploration, but there are also other findings that are more related to the triggers of implicit learning, of hidden learnings, that are, for example, I don't know, when I choose a workshop, I have to choose between three. And what I implicitly learn, is that I have to choose very quickly, and I can choose between two things. If it's relevant for me now, like in my career, or for example, if it just, I want to do it for fun.
So there is some kind of a personal development as well as a skill development angle, right? So either you do it for yourself or maybe for your career.
Exactly. So when we, so if you identify this, for example, you can say, okay, you know what? This course is not just about the skills specifically, but also helps you reflect on a personal level, so what I like, but also on in my future career, so what I want to be, right? With a choice. And so in my opinion, and I see it as like it's very open, but we have another course that helps students to come up with a plan, with a future plan, and it's called Manage Your Master. And so my option was, okay, but why not, why this course that is ID Academy, that is very skill related, why cannot be linked to a bit of a higher perspective? So now in this year, I'm working and I'm just explore, and I think about my ways of exploring, but at the same time, I also, you know, see what I can do. But at the same time, these things that you're doing now in this present can help you to reflect, to see what you want to be. So
there could be more integration. I get what you're saying. So it's now it is all in different pieces and you're trying to connect them together, because in that sense it will make much more sense of what you're doing. Or it might be just you're doing a lot of workshops on random basis, but it's not really going towards a specific goal for that matter, right?
Yeah, and sometimes it's important not to have a specific goal, but sometimes it's important to at least reflect that you don't have a specific goal and
be conscious about it.
And be conscious about it. So there are many ways you can use these findings for, I think. But yes, so but I think when we talk about this, so for me, when I started understanding this hidden learnings and tacit hidden curriculum, that are they are the same but a bit separate, I thought, okay, we can actually use these things for really different things. So maybe from one side there is the aim of the course, but on the other side there is the aim of the students to really reflect on, for example, the exploration in itself. And I think the next question that so this, I think this graduation for me left me a lot of questions, or a lot of things that I wanted to, you know, to explore, and that's things I haven't done because I didn't have the time to do. And I think the most interesting one for me is, okay, but how can we teach according to this hidden curriculum that's every time different, because it's very contextual, and how we can help students to reflect on their own habits of mind, their own way of thinking. And so that's besides, because, you know, honestly, we can learn a lot of things by ourselves now. You know, you have YouTube, you can really learn whatever you want.
But then it's also interesting to see that there are things which we probably might not be able to learn on a virtual scale, because when you see a person probably making some recipe, you learn more by observing the person in action, right? Which might not be the same case if you're just probably listing down a recipe in hand and trying to mimic it, right? There are some subtle things which you, as you mentioned, with the tacit knowledge and so on, which is very difficult in a virtual environment. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, there is some work related to it already. So because they try to say, okay, like, if you, it's, you know, it's, of course, if you have a teacher that, you know, that you can go to and you can be together, it's, you can absorb this tacit knowledge. But if you watch it from a screen and talks to you in an hour, it's very different. So that's why the procedural tacit knowledge became extremely important. For example, I think some designers look at how to use e-learning, so like virtual videos and stuff, to learn from extreme experts in knife making, I think it was. And it was just like, was interesting because they used an expert learner, so like someone that already knew a lot about it, and then this expert learner asked a lot of why, how, etc., and then got all of this information and then boiled them down for the one that were young, novice learner. So
it is still transferable, right? It is not impossible. Like in a virtual sense, it can happen.
Yeah, it can. Yeah. So the point that it can happen, I think, it just takes much more time, right? So yeah, from one side, there is this, I have this question: is our knowledge, like, do we always have to explicit every type of knowledge? Yes, of course, because it's useful, but at the same time, yeah. Is this going to be, you know, the end result of our life? Like, if we, because I think, you know, like I can see it with my sister. My sister now, she's in 4th grade in high school, and she's in Italy, and she's gonna continue, I think, till September. She's gonna stay in the house studying.
Oh, you mean with the you're talking about the quarantine situation, right?
Sorry?
Are you talking about the situation right now, which we have?
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Okay.
So but just imagine, you know, like you have, like, what are actually, so now my sister is learning things from a computer, but yeah, so we are not ready. So we haven't, it's funny because I think we haven't reached enough awareness about this tacit knowledge we give to students, and we just say, oh yeah, that is not cool enough, the e-learning, or it's weird, it's a bit, you know, something is missing. It's true, something is missing, and that's knowledge. And you can break it down a lot if you do all that procedure, but it's a long procedure, and people don't have for now any idea, I think, about what actually is this tacit knowledge and how.
Because I think with the research which you have done in these cases right now, with the lockdown situation where literally everything is being done, practiced, and even learned on your laptop or a screen, right? So if you are able to externalize these things which are very tacit in nature, it makes the people who are designing curriculums, education experts, really more aware of what we should focus and understand for the students as well, right?
Yeah.
I think it has really high value in even these situations right now which we are facing.
Yeah. But again, like, so I don't wanna convey the wrong message that I think, like skills, knowledge are extremely important. Like the explicit knowledge, it's very important. It's just that so I don't want to say, oh yeah, like everything should go on more on the hidden curriculum or only on the hidden curriculum. But I think if you integrate the hidden curriculum, then some people consider the hidden curriculum as personal development. You can call it experiential learning if you want, or transformative learning. You can call it as much
anything you want. Yeah.
Because in the end, it's the same. I did some literature review, and it's honestly the same. But if you at least consider that, it really could, I think, help. Also, students to be a bit more aware of how they see things, and if how they see things actually it's good for them. If oh, I see it always as a professional. Wait a moment, is this like really what I want? If it's that what I want, that's perfect. But if it's not, maybe you have the possibility to to reconsider a bit your own way of learning. And I think, yes, as a procedural tacit knowledge, yeah, I think there's also going to be a lot of work to do.
Celeste, thank you so much for joining. It's a big pleasure for us.
Well, I hope I haven't talked too much.
No, it's perfect. I think we covered in deep with all your work and also the impact and implications of your research, right? So also wish you the best with your thesis defense. I hope is it happening virtually or
oh yes,
on Zoom? Is it happening on Zoom?
Yeah, it's gonna happen on Zoom, probably in this room again.
All right.
And it's gonna
good luck.
Yes, thanks. I will send you the link of Zoom if you.
Sure. Okay. All right.
Yes. Thank you very much for also letting me talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
And
all right.
Good luck very much.
Bye. Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.